Every nation inherits documents that quietly alter the course of its history. Some are remembered because they proclaim freedom, others because they establish new governments. On the 1st of November 1858, another such document was read aloud at Allahabad. Issued in the name of Queen Victoria, it announced that the government of India would no longer be exercised by the East India Company, but directly by the British Crown. With that declaration, nearly a century of company rule gave way to a new constitutional order that would shape the governance of India until independence. This is the story of that document, the Queen's Proclamation of 1858. Every constitutional document deserves to be read before it is judged. The Queen's Proclamation of 1858 is one such document. More than a royal announcement, it was the public declaration of a constitutional transformation already enacted by the British Parliament through the Government of India Act of 1858. For the first time, the authority to govern India would be exercised in the name of the British Crown rather than East India Company. To understand its significance, we must begin where every historical inquiry should begin, with the document itself. The proclamation opens with the formal style of Queen Victoria, sovereign of the United Kingdom and its overseas dominions. To a modern reader, these ceremonial words may appear routine. In constitutional practice, however, they identify the source from which every declaration that follows derives its legal authority. The voice is the Queen's, but the change it announces reflects a decision already taken by Parliament, a transfer of government from a commercial corporation to the Crown itself. The first substantive paragraph leaves little room for ambiguity. The territories that had long been administered by the East India Company would henceforth be administered in the name of the British Crown. In constitutional terms, this was the defining moment of the proclamation. It marked the formal beginning of Crown rule in India and gave public expression to the constitutional settlement created by the Government of India Act 1858. With the transfer of government, the proclamation next addressed the people of India. It called upon all subjects to remain faithful to the Crown, to bear true allegiance to the sovereign, and to recognize the authority of those appointed to govern in her name. This was more than a declaration of loyalty. It established the constitutional relationship between the British Crown and the people of India, replacing the authority previously exercised by the East India Company. Having assumed the government of India, the Crown next identified the authority through whom that government would be exercised. Charles John Viscount Canning was appointed the first Viceroy and the Governor General of India. From this moment onward, the administration of India would be carried on in the name of the sovereign, through the office of the Viceroy. The change was constitutional, but its effects would shape every branch of government in British India. Constitutional change did not mean administrative disruption. The proclamation confirmed that those already serving in the civil and the military administration would continue in their respective offices, subject to the authority of the Crown. Government would change its constitutional foundation while preserving the continuity of its institutions. The proclamation then turned to the rulers of the Indian states. Every treaty and engagement previously concluded by the East India Company was accepted by the Crown and promised faithful observance. This assurance sought to preserve continuity in Britain's relations with the princely states, while placing those relationships under the direct authority of the Crown. One of the most significant declarations followed immediately thereafter. The Crown declared that it desired no extension of its existing territorial possessions. While affirming its determination to defend its own dominions, it also declared that it would sanction no encroachment upon the territories of others. The era of territorial annexation, which had characterized much of the company's expansion, was publicly renounced. The assurance went beyond territory alone. The proclamation pledged that the rights, dignity, and honor of the Indian princes would be respected as the Crown respected its own. Peaceful relations with the princely states were presented not merely as political necessity, but as an essential foundation for stability and orderly government. Prosperity, the proclamation declared, could flourish only where peace and good government prevailed. Internal tranquility was presented as the condition upon which social advancement depended. In these words, the Crown expressed the principle that orderly government was to serve the welfare of all who lived within its territories. The proclamation next defined the obligations of the sovereign herself. The Crown declared that it stood bound to the people of India by the very same duties owed to all other subjects of the British Empire. This was not a promise of privilege. It was a declaration that the obligations of government extended equally to India. Among the most enduring assurances contained in the proclamation was its declaration on religion. Although spoken in the name of Christian sovereign, the Crown expressly disclaimed both the right and the desire to impose its religious convictions upon any of its subjects. No person, it declared, should be favored or disadvantaged on account of religious beliefs or observance. Those exercising authority under the Crown were instructed to refrain from interference in matters of faith and worship. Religious liberty was accompanied by another important assurance. The proclamation declared that all alike would enjoy the equal and impartial protection of law. It was a statement of legal principle that sought to place every subject under the same protection of the Crown's justice. The proclamation also addressed the question of public service. Appointments to the office under the Crown, it declared, were to depend upon education, ability, and integrity. In principle, eligibility for public employment was not to be determined by race or creed, but by merit and qualification. The final assurance before the proclamation turned to the events of the recent rebellion concerned the traditions of India itself. The Crown recognized the deep attachment of the people to the lands inherited from their ancestors, and promised that in framing and administering the law, due regard would be paid to the ancient rites, usages, and customs of India. With this declaration, the proclamation completed its principal constitutional assurances. The document would now turn away from the promises of governance and address the rebellion that had transformed the course of Indian history. The proclamation now turns from constitutional assurances to the events that had made those assurances necessary. It attributes the uprising of 1857 not to the people of India as a whole, but to ambitious men who, according to the Crown, had deceived their countrymen through false reports and led them into open rebellion. This is the proclamation's own explanation for the causes of the disturbances. Whether history reaches the same conclusion is a separate question. Our task here is to understand how the Crown itself chose to describe the events while announcing a new system of government. Having described the rebellion, the proclamation immediately introduces another principle, mercy. The Crown declares that those who had been misled into rebellion and who were willing to return to the paths of duty would be considered for pardon. The document therefore combines two ideas. The authority of government would be firmly maintained, yet wherever possible, punishment would give way to reconciliation. This promise of mercy was not entirely new. Earlier, Lord Canning had already issued an offer of pardon in one province with the object of reducing further bloodshed. The Queen's proclamation expressly approves that earlier policy and confirms it as the policy of the Crown itself. The offer of clemency therefore became part of the new constitutional settlement announced in 1858. The proclamation next defines the extent of that clemency. A general amnesty is provided to those who return peacefully to their homes and abandon armed resistance. One important exception, however, is immediately stated. Those convicted of the murder of British subjects are excluded from this general promise of pardon. The distinction drawn by the document is between participation in the rebellion itself and crimes which the Crown regarded as placing an offender beyond the reach of mercy. The proclamation then explains why mercy would not be extended in every case. It declares that the demands of justice prevent clemency towards those convicted of murder. Here the document seeks to reconcile two principles: mercy where it could be shown, justice where the Crown believed it could not be withheld. The proclamation also distinguishes between different degrees of responsibility. Those described as leaders, instigators, or persons who knowingly sheltered offenders were not included within the general promise of pardon. Even so, the document directs that the circumstances of each individual case should be taken into consideration before punishment was determined. Responsibility, according to the proclamation, was to be assessed individually rather than collectively. The concluding declaration on clemency returns once again to reconciliation. All others who laid down their arms, returned to their homes, and resumed peaceful occupations were promised unconditional pardon, amnesty, and oblivion of past offenses. The choice of the word oblivion is particularly significant. The Crown declared not merely its willingness to forgive, but its intention that for those who accepted these terms, the offences of rebellion should pass into the past. When the proclamation concludes its declarations on clemency, it returns once more to the purpose of government. It expresses the hope that with the restoration of internal tranquility, India would devote itself to peaceful industry, public improvement, and orderly administration. The emphasis now shifts from conflict to reconstruction. The Crown presents peace not as an end in itself, but as the foundation upon which government, commerce, and public welfare might once again proceed. The final substantive declaration expresses the principle upon which the Crown claimed its administration would rest. Government, the proclamation declares, was to be administered for the benefit of all its subjects resident in India. Whether that aspiration was realized in practice belongs to the wider study of history. As students of this document, our concern is to recognize the standard which the Crown publicly set for its own government. The proclamation ends not with an assertion of power, but with a statement of responsibility. In their prosperity will be our strength, in their contentment our security, and in their gratitude our best reward. These closing words reveal how the Crown wished its government to be understood. Authority, prosperity, and public confidence were presented as inseparable principles of governance. From a legal perspective, the significance of Queen's Proclamation lies not merely in its language, but in its constitutional effect. Issued under the authority of the Government of India Act 1858, it publicly announced the transfer of Government of India from the East India Company to the British Crown. In doing so, it marked the formal commencement of Crown rule in India and established the constitutional framework within which British India would thereafter be administered. Several assurances contained in the proclamation continued to influence the constitutional development of India. Its declarations concerning religious non-interference, equality before the law, admission to public employment on merit, and respect for established rights and customs introduced principles that remained part of constitutional discussion throughout the period of British administration. Although the institutions of modern India arose under very different historical circumstances, these declarations occupy an important place in the constitutional history of the subcontinent. The Queen's Proclamation did not bring an end to history. It marked the beginning of a new constitutional chapter. The rule of the East India Company had come to its conclusion. The era of the British Raj had begun. Every historical document must be understood within the circumstances in which it was written. The Queen's Proclamation of 1858 was neither a constitution nor a declaration of independence. It was the public charter through which the British Crown announced the principles upon which it proposed to govern India after the great upheaval of 1857. Some of its assurances would become enduring constitutional ideals. Others would remain subject of historical debate. As a primary document, however, its importance is beyond dispute. It records, in the Crown's own words, the constitutional transition that transformed the governance of India. And that is why, more than a century and a half later, it remains a document worthy of being read, examined, and understood.